While relaxing and watching the grass grow, we get to experience the texture of our life. Could there be any doubt that the grass will grow by design? It was made to be grass, and it will grow as grass is known to grow. Or is there the slightest chance that it will come up as a palm tree? No. Grass, in the process of growing, cannot possibly come up as anything other than grass. It simply relaxes into its nature and thus will assure us that the result of its existence will indeed be the texture of grass. One of the most stressful situations arises when one says yes, but you really would rather say no. In truth, if one does not have the freedom to say no, yes means absolutely nothing. Here's an example. My friend is an avid volunteer at church. She's a contributor. However, many times she extends herself so diligently, she begins to destroy the source of her enthusiasm, her very own health. Serving others is rewarding, and yet jumping in all the time denies others this growth opportunity. She's actually robbing others of the joy of contributing. On the other hand, when needing help, sometimes people are afraid to ask. This just happened the other day at the grocery store. A mother was afraid, she claimed she was afraid to ask her children if they would help around the house. One can start by saying, I have a request. If the responder asks to hear what that request is, you have created an opportunity for a potential buy-in. At least they're interested in knowing what you need. When stating your request, it helps to say, give it some thought and get back to me. Your enthusiastic request must be expressed as you seek to live in the commitment and community of those around you. Contribution gives them a chance to make a difference with you as you acknowledge their generous assistance. Harmonizing boundaries and demonstrating love and kindness can be tricky. Yet, the balancing of these two outcomes has its own rewards. This is a valuable tool worth developing. Presenting your true self in making a request is vital and must be done without attachment to the result. Attachment is disempowering to you and limits the freedom for the recipient to be truthful in responding yes or no. Having an expectation for an answer, either way, prior to the request is manipulative. Trusting that the right person will respond according to your need is the best way to not only avoid stress, but it helps develop persistence, patience, and power in you, the requester. At some point, a completely different approach may be necessary. I have had some interesting experiences with stress, regardless of the cause. When I am stressed, it is as though someone else's words come out of my mouth. One of the times I experienced this follows. One night, when I was newly trained in a 24-hour pharmacy, a young, well-dressed man came up to the counter after all the other customers had left. He had already been waiting in the background for over an hour, and it was after 11:30 p.m. He stood there on the other side of the counter and told me that he had a gun in his pocket and wanted me to provide him with all the controlled substances in our locked narcotic cabinet. Pharmacy regulations are numerous for all sorts of circumstances. Record keeping is very important. Now, in my attempt to remain in adherence with this pharmacy protocol and record keeping, I told him I was still in training and I needed to first check with my manager regarding the necessary paperwork. To his dismay, I began to page the manager on the intercom. Meanwhile, he begged me to not complete my call for direction. I was so stressed and focused on preserving my drug inventory accounts and my job that I ignored the possibility of being shot. Meanwhile, the manager was a bit slow in responding to my call. I had started to page her, and by the time I began announcing her name on the intercom, the man decided to just give up trying to reason with me. He fled the scene. When I reported what had happened to my manager, she called the police and the counter was examined for fingerprints. I learned that this pharmacy had already been robbed the previous 2 months during the last week of the month. My incident happened the last week of August, and that is why they needed a relief pharmacist from out of town to cover that week. I was maintaining my boundaries regarding narcotic drug records and focused on what I believed to be appropriate. The reality of a gun in his pocket never fazed me. I am not recommending that you manage stress in this way. However, stress regarding your boundaries can change the way you approach a given situation. Your solution to stress regarding boundaries is related to the integrity that you practice in your daily life. What you value begins to determine how you respond to situations and maybe the way you expect others to value what you value. Providing what this man wanted could have been a way of pleasing him for a degree of approval. My thought was, well, of course, he would want me to stay in controlled substance compliance as well, because that standard was important to me. What you value begins to define how you respond to situations. This example is a guide for what you want to take a stand for, what you value, and therefore establish boundaries around. The boundaries you define for yourself are the foundation of your integrity. Are you relaxing and living up to the nature of your identity? The ultimate question from Shakespeare is to be or not to be. That is the question, and only you can relax into it.